at 6:30 on my clock, so I guess we'll get started. Hello and welcome to the Tuesday situational update on high-path avian influenza directed towards small flock stakeholders in Ontario. I'm Ashley Honsberger. I'm the Executive Director for Poultry Industry Council, and I'm pleased to be co-hosting the event with you this evening. Once again, the events were made possible through some funding with the CAP program. So thanks to OMAFRA for choosing us to tag team on making this happen. I say this every week, but in case you're new here, this is a really good home-based resource for finding all of the links and information that you need on an ongoing basis. So this is the Poultry Industry Council website. If you just pick that drop down there on the right-hand side underneath resources, the biosecurity and disease page, excuse me, it's kind of the culmination of all of the high path stuff that you need right now. And the latest one, which I think Al's going to bring up in a little bit, is this pretty cool new map that's showing all of the high path AI across Canada in wild bird populations. So that's something new that Dr. Brian Stevens and his colleagues have been working on. So feel free to check that out. Joining us tonight, we have Victoria Wilson, who's here with her colleague, Binu George. And Binu is going to be joining us moving forward for the next few weeks. We have a special presentation as well from Bethany Parkinson with the Canadian Mental Health Association. The OMAFRA team is comprised of Dr. Luci Rosca and Al Dam, our poultry specialist. Dr. Brian Stevens is here to answer questions and also give us a little bit of an update. And of course, the PIC team, myself and Charlotte here. As usual, if you have any questions, feel free to pop that into the Q&A in the bottom. We're going to do our short updates, and then at the end of the updates, we are going to get to those questions. So Victoria, if you want to join me and get started.
Hi, thanks, Ashley. Thanks for having me, everyone. Happy to come on and have the continued conversation and give you all an update on where we're at. It has been a busy week, and I would like to reference the website, as since the last time we spoke, there has been one additional site added that we refer to as an IP, or an infected premise. So we're up to a total of 20 confirmed IPs here in Ontario. We have quarantined all sites and response actions are underway. I will make note, we do have listed IP21 on the website. This one is going through some more testing, as the initial test results did indicate the detection to be a low pathogenic strain of AI. Therefore, it's not considered an IP at this time. So samples have been sent over to our National Center of Foreign Animal Disease for additional testing. This site is under quarantine at this time. The maps are currently up to date with IP 18, 19, and 20, which when we last spoke, they were not available yet. So they will be updated each time that a new IP or a primary control zone is developed. So continue to watch that map. I will highlight that within those maps, they are separated out into two control zones. Within these zones, there is a primary control zone, which outlines the approximate 10-kilometer buffer, and there is the approximate 3-kilometer minimum infected zone as well. The importance with this is that it has different restrictions and requirements. The entire primary control zone movement of poultry in, out, and through the control zones. I will flag one for sure. Within the infected zone, it is prohibited for the placement of poultry. There is consideration of placement of commercial birds within the infected zone of what we consider IP 1, 2, 3, 6, and 10. And then this would need to be done with our movement and permitting group, as they would be better able to direct you on the conditions that would need to be met in order to place within the infected zone of the previous mentioned. However, I will bring to attention the category of small holding poultry, which would be referred to as under 300 birds for non-commercial purpose, is still prohibited at this time. We will continue to keep you updated on this topic of consideration of placement as conversations continue to happen both at a national and regional level. Again, if there's any specific questions, reach out to the movement control group. The remaining infected zones are still prohibited for movement of live birds into, through, and out of the infected zone. And I'd also like to point out the map, which is one of my favorite tools, is designed to have an address feature where you can enter your address in and it'll drop an X into the map, which should help you determine if you are in a broad primary control zone or if you're in the infected zone or if you're not in it at all. The website is continually being updated to provide further clarity and feedback based on your feedback, and we're trying to make it easier for you to use and understand. There is a new look to the permits and conditions page. It's more of an interactive tool that you can use the drop-down boxes to filter what you are looking to move and how. This makes it a little easier instead of searching through those charts. There is also some clarification and information at the bottom once you've filtered through what you are looking for. So that gives a little bit more insight as well. The phone number and email address to reach the permitting group is also on this page to better set up movements and answer all your permitting questions. I will spread awareness that this is definitely spreading across the globe at this point. We are seeing lots of action. So anyone with farm animals must practice good biosecurity habits to protect poultry and prevent the disease from spreading anymore. For those of you who might not have attended last week, there are some really great resources on our website that I will highlight that are designated specifically for owners of backyard flocks and pet birds. There's 4 documents and links available. There's the 5 rules to prevent and detect disease in backyard flocks and pet birds. We have a protect your flock from bird flu, a general producer guide on farm biosecurity standards, and national avian on farm biosecurity standards, and lots of good information for backyard flock and some detailed information on biosecurity if you are interested. We do respond to sick bird calls and high mortality calls, and our sampling teams do follow up with these as they do come in. So please continue to check back with the website as we continue to navigate this situation. Our permitting group has been working to grant movement permits as they come in as quickly as possible, and it has been going very well. Obviously, there are some bumps and hiccups that will happen, but overall process is running smoothly. Again, I will highlight, if you have any questions surrounding movement of live birds, I do encourage you to reach out to the number or email on the website to get the most up-to-date answers for all of your permitting questions. I'm going to leave this update here. There's lots going on. It's a broad update on the current situation, but hopefully it gives you a good idea of what's going on and what has happened since last Tuesday.
Okay, thanks very much, Tori. We've got your link posted in the chat here, so that's the most up-to-date information in the meantime, and we'll see you next week. You're of course going to stick around for some questions at the end. So now I'm going to invite Bethany Parkinson from the Canadian Mental Health Association to join me on screen here. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. I'm just going to share my screen here so you all can see it. All right, so thank you so much for having me tonight. As Ashley said, I'm Bethany Parkinson, and I'm with the Canadian Mental Health Association Ontario. I'm with the Farming Mental Health team, and I'm here tonight to talk about a few things regarding mental health supports. I understand that it's quite a high stress time in the poultry industry. So I'm going to go through a few things. So first, I'm going to chat about responding to stress. So stress is a healthy part of the human body. It's important to recognize that emotions and intense emotions are sometimes a way to respond to difficult situations and stressful situations. Stress, like I said, is pretty normal. It's part of the human body and the human experience. But when it becomes overwhelming and too difficult to cope with, it's important to reach out to support. And there are a number of supports available that I'll touch on tonight. So a way to cope with stress is to utilize and strengthen coping strategies. We all have different coping strategies that we utilize. Some of them I put examples here. So seeking support from family, friends, peers, as well as other people within the agriculture industry, going for walks, taking breaks, and doing something enjoyable. I find reading The Ontario Farmer is sometimes a good way to take a break. What coping strategies are. So coping strategies are conscious or unconscious strategies used to reduce unpleasant emotions. Building and utilizing coping strategies before stressful events occur can help reduce the intensity or difficulty of emotions. So kind of having a plan in place to build coping strategies before events get too stressful, so you have a way to respond and manage your emotions and stress. In addition to the above listed coping strategies, other proactive strategies can include doing things among yourself, so lowering expectations that you have for yourself, asking others for help, engaging in problem solving, or expressing and de-escalating distressing emotions that you may have. And I want to touch on responding to someone who may be in crisis or in distress that you may come across, whether it be working with someone on their farm or within the industry. So first, if someone expresses that they're in distress or crisis, first thing is to keep things simple. So listen without judgment, validate their feelings, show concern and support. So keeping eye contact, ensuring that the person is safe in your presence and that you're going to get them support. If you suspect they are experiencing difficulty with their mental health, so this could be a number of things. If you see a change in behavior, if they share that they have low thoughts or moods, if they show low affect, so they have a lack of interest. Conversation pieces may include, hey, I've noticed this change, and you can name the specific change, and I want to check in and offer support. This may probe questions regarding their mental health or crisis support that's required. So some follow-up questions you could ask could be, how are things going with your mental health? Or I'm concerned about your safety and well-being. Have you been having thoughts of suicide? It's important to note here that asking about self-harm or suicide will not influence someone to think about suicide or to actually complete suicide or attempt suicide. It's more of a proactive approach to have these conversations, to seek support when needed, especially with the stressful industry that you're all in. Extra support may be required, especially at this time. And if the person you're chatting with is in distress or experiencing thoughts of suicide, please refer to the crisis supports below. And if it is an emergency, please call 911. The supports are listed. I'll get to them in a minute. I also include in this document, which will be available to you. I think Charlotte will be sharing it within the chat. So the first one is, or the one I shared here, is box breathing. So this is a breathing technique that I find is really useful, especially if people may be having an anxiety attack or a panic attack, or they're just having a high level amount of stress. This only takes like a minute or two to do, and it really can de-escalate and bring the human body back to kind of get rid of that overstimulation and bring the body back to a central place. So there's 4 steps to box breathing. I won't actually do it, but I'll just go through the steps. So step 1 is breathing in and counting to 4 slowly, feeling the air enter your lungs. Step 2 is holding your breath for 4 seconds. Try to avoid inhaling or exhaling for 4 seconds. So essentially just holding your breath. Step 3 is slowly exhaling through your mouth for 4 seconds, and then repeating steps 1 to 3 until you feel recentered. When I do this breathing technique, I actually like to picture a box. So as if I'm like tracing a box. Some people actually like to trace like a square or a box while they're doing this. It kind of works with all the senses to get the body recentered. And finally, I have included some crisis urgent supports. The first one is the Farming Wellness Initiative. So that's through a program through Canadian Mental Health Ontario, and it's in collaboration with the OFA as well as OMAFRA. So it is a line for farmers to access, farmers or their families, or anyone that is a farm worker. So it's that number there. They do provide crisis support, as well as they do provide free unlimited counseling sessions to farmers and their families. So if you just call that number there, that will provide you with getting connected to a counselor. And more information can be found on the Farmer Wellness Initiative link that's listed there. I do also have listed a few of our CMHA branches that provide 24/7 crisis support. So they're listed there, and the website is listed there. These are local branches. There is 26 branches, CMHA branches within Ontario. So if you want to search a branch near you, you certainly can. You would just type into Google. It's also found on our main CMHA Ontario page. These ones I pointed out is where many of the outbreaks are occurring. So I thought it'd be nice to connect with some local branches there. And that I will stop sharing. That's Yeah, thank you so much for having me. That's just an overview of stress management and some mental health supports.
Thank you so much, Bethany. I know some of the best webinars I've been on encourage, some group breathing activities, and it really is a great way to find that center again. So thank you so much. So I'm going to invite Brian Stevens to come on and give us a brief update from the wild bird perspective.
Thanks, Ashley. So for the wild birds, just to give an update for everybody, we've detected it throughout Southern Ontario, out through Eastern Ontario, and we continue to get cases in every week. We're up to more than 50 detections at this point, with more coming in all the time. The most common species that we're seeing it in are the waterfowl, shorebirds, and raptors, with Canada geese, bald eagles, and turkey vultures being the most common species that we're getting right now that are testing positive for this virus. We continue to see new species being detected. So last week we had a couple of wood ducks that we detected in, and that is a new species for this virus here. In addition, we'd heard about corvid species, so crows and ravens being infected out east. And up until recently, we hadn't had a case, but over the past week, we've had some crows and ravens test positive as well. And we're getting more of those species in at this time. And at this time, we're basically testing all wild birds that are coming through our service. So that includes all the songbirds and any other wild bird that comes through CWHC. If you want updates on where this is being seen across the province in wild birds, the dashboard that Charlotte should be putting up a link to, and Ashley had put a picture of early on in the presentation, that will give you a good idea as to where this is being detected and what species this is being detected in wild birds. They are currently updating that, and I think they're a couple weeks behind at this point, but I suspect over the next week or two we'll be up to date, and you can see in real time where this virus is being detected. And yeah, I'm happy to answer further questions at the end of this on any wild bird species that you have.
Thank you, Brian. And that's a good reminder. If you do have any questions, just use that Q&A function down at the bottom. Try to avoid using the chat because we tend to lose the questions and the chitter chatter that goes on in the background here. So I'm going to invite Al Dam to join and do your thing.
Hello everyone. So yeah, thanks again. I'm going to share my screen too and throw up a couple of things that I wanted to talk about tonight. And it's kind of a segue from what Brian was just talking about in terms of some of the new species that we're seeing, including the scavengers, which include turkey vultures, raptors, the corvids, and how improper stock management can actually potentially bring the disease right to your farm. So this is an important concept. This info sheet was just pushed out to industry today. I'll get posted online with PIC later tonight. And essentially it goes over the fact that proper dead stock management can impact not only bringing disease onto your farm, but spreading it to wildlife, because that it can go both ways, right? Or spreading disease to your neighbor's farm. I've personally seen, and it's not just about managing your poultry dead stock too, like any livestock, well, if you have livestock, you'll have dead stock at some point, but any dead stock can be a risk, because not only will you bring those animals, those scavengers to your farm if you're managing them properly, but we've seen cases where they've then picked up carcasses and flown or walked other farms to consume them. I've seen bald eagles pick up a dead chicken at one farm or a piglet at one farm and eat it on the roof of another poultry farm. So just some basic things to remember about contamination of clothing, and don't leave the dead stock disposal site open. And there's lots of information here, including the PIC website. This is our dead stock page, and actually I even put Ontario pork's disposal methods on there, because that they have a great resource there. Just to show you what's going on, this disease is not just in Ontario, it's across the country. I updated this today. So the Midwest is getting ravaged by this, and you can see based on the colors here, like red is commercial, yellow is non-commercial backyard poultry, it's in as many backyard flocks as it is in commercial operations. We are actively investigating a number of potential backyard suspect cases right now. So if you are seeing issues, as we'd mentioned in the past, if you suspect it's avian influenza, please call your vet and report it to the CFIA number. The infographic here from Ontario Animal Health Network is on the PIC website. It's another great resource that you can spread amongst your friends that have poultry also. This is the map that Tori was talking about, and there's a lot of information on here, and you can drill down into this map with the interactive component here. There is something I did want to bring up though from last week. We have, I don't know if you guys have seen this or not, but there is concern as to whether or not this is zoonotic. We've had Ministry of Health online with us here. This is their webpage in terms of highly pathogenic H5 avian influenza and how it impacts humans. There was a concern of someone in Colorado testing positive, potentially positive for H5N1 last week. It has been found in, I think the other case was a person in the UK. So this potentially can be an issue. It'll only be an issue for folks if they are in contact with diseased birds. So just be aware of that. And as I mentioned before, Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care have a webpage for avian influenza if you have any questions. This is the 5-pointer that Tori talked about here. The poster is actually right behind me here on that. So you can download that poster here if you want. And also we get questions all the time about what should I do with my backyard birds. And I actually just put something on Facebook that CFIA has actually talked about things like prevent contact between your flock and wild bird, don't share live birds, eggs, or other bird products, even with neighbors, friends, and family. We are in an active outbreak situation across the whole country right now, and this is going to be an issue that will be with us not for a short time, let's just say that. So the response that we have to do depends on how well we can control the disease, and you guys are part of that solution also. This is some of the information that is available on the CFIA website. This page is also on the PIC biosecurity page also. So lots of information there. Just want to make sure that folks are aware of that. And thank you also to Bethany, because this is an issue on the mental health side. I don't want you guys to think this isn't an issue for our infected premises, and we're up to 20 now. Those folks are under a severe amount of trauma and stress, whether they're backyard flocks or commercial poultry, and that's why we are that concerned to make sure that we have that support when it's needed. So that, I'll turn it back to Ashley. I will stop sharing.
Don't go too far, because now it's the question and answer period. And we've got, as I mentioned, our whole roster of people kind of hanging out in the background. So we did have a question come in earlier today offline. Someone who just mentions they've been really good on following all of the biosecurity tips and tricks you've been sharing, but how can they safely feed their flocks some foods like dandelions or extra garden produce? Is there any way to safely ensure that they're not introducing AI into their chickens or anything else in the environment? And if there is no safe way to do this, then when will they be able to do it safely? Like how do they know it's safe to start these practices?
That's a fantastic question. I don't have an answer. How do you disinfect? Like it's once again, it's a function of limiting interaction with wild birds. And if the question revolves around how do I make sure there's not goose poop on my vegetables, that might be a decent question to ask. Limiting wild bird interaction with the garden is an issue, but a lot of people have gardens so that they can have wild birds around. So it's going to be a challenge. It's about risk, right? So it's going to be about limiting that. This disease is still one that is pretty much, I say, fatal once it gets into your poultry flock. With chickens and turkeys, we have seen ducks die from this also, and geese and lots of other things that Brian can run the list off of.
You have anything to add, Luci?
Going to say it is possible because there is environmental contamination, and if you do have wild birds nearby or like a pond, it is very possible that feces can contaminate the areas where we're going to harvest any type of plants to give it to your birds. So I would consider that a risk.
Okay. And that kind of leads into another question that came up here. What is the shelf life, or how long is the virus active on bird droppings that are in the environment?
It's depending on the temperature, it's depending on exposure to the UV lights as well. So let's say during cold time, like under 4 degrees Celsius or so, virus resists more. I will say between 6 and 30 days. It's a wide range depending on the temperature, like I said, and then exposure to the UV lights.
Okay, thanks. And are mosquitoes spreaders of avian influenza?
We have information about flies being responsible for transmitting avian influenza. I don't have information about mosquitoes, but it is very possible that that can be transmitted too. Viruses are, they need some organic matter to get transmitted from one to move from one place to another. So it is very possible, but I don't have a straight answer to you.
Okay. And I should also mention, I noticed there's a couple people dialing in over the phone. If you do have a question, you can push *9 and that will raise your hand. And then we can work with you to get your question answered. So another question, wondering if I should avoid bringing straw into my place in the fall. I usually order bales from Wolf Island that are delivered in the fall and use them to insulate the backyard flock coops and also bedding over the winter. So.
Yes, that was a good question from Wendy. So as far as straw versus shavings or anything, it's a function of making sure that you're keeping the wild birds away from the straw, right? So if you're storing straw, make sure you don't have pigeons or starlings or anything in the barn, potentially defecating on it. Like I said, it's a fecal oral route for a lot of this transmission with birds. So keeping that separate is going to be an issue. I know for some of our commercial poultry folks, they're actually heat treating their barn to try and destroy the virus, but that's going to be a function of, you know, is your straw clean? If you're buying it in the fall, it'll be probably the winter wheat that comes off in August. Heat and dry, the virus doesn't like, so that shouldn't be as much an issue. I'd be more concerned about contamination from birds in your storage area.
Okay. Is there a safe way to bring sand in to replenish a run, leaving it covered for a certain amount of time? I'm kind of assuming the sand might be in a pile out in the environment, perhaps.
Well, I think if you're bringing sand in from a beach and there's geese on it, that probably is not a good idea. If it's sand from that's in a pile or coming from a sand pit, that shouldn't be as much of an issue, but it's covered. Luci had mentioned yeah.
I wouldn't cover the sand. I may just expose it to UV lights, like I said, because the virus is very sensible to that. But just maintain a screen on the top so it doesn't get from like birds dropping on it.
Yeah, a solid roof over top of it somehow to prevent droppings hitting it.
Okay, so kind of similar to the straw, where it's more about who's going to visit and defecate on it. So we're curious about finding any or many bird feeder type songbirds infected with HPAI.
At this point, we haven't detected any songbird species aside from crows and ravens. We're continuing to test any that come in through our service. I can tell you about Europe because they've been dealing with this longer than we have, and they will occasionally detect it in some songbird species. So we know that it can infect them. It appears to be rare in those species, but it's something we're definitely keeping an eye out for.
And someone just a little further down was wondering about bird feeders and the general public. Like, is there a need to have communication to have them take it down, or what's the deal with bird feeders in this whole situation?
Yeah, so at this point, the bird feeder question comes up all the time. If you have backyard poultry, the recommendation is to take them down because you want to minimize the chances of bringing wild birds onto your property and having them come in contact with your poultry. As for spread bird feeders, I don't think it's been shown well enough to say that there is a big concern for songbirds spreading this virus around. So at this point, there's not a big worry about the general public taking down bird feeders to worry about that. More the concern is waterfowl. So having people not feed ducks and geese, because those are the real carriers of this virus. And if you start to congregate them, that's where the concern for spreading it a bit quicker comes in. But at this point, there's no general consensus to take down bird feeders for the general public.
Okay. So Kelly is asking, can you explain the non-poultry blue star on the wild bird dashboard? What does non-poultry represent?
So I can tell you, I don't run that dashboard, so I'm not sure exactly what all of the stars mean, but I believe the circles are the ones that are coming from me. So the red circles, I believe, are confirmed cases, and orange are preliminary positives. I believe the stars are probably domestic animals, so non-poultry, I would assume those are waterfowl that are being kept by people, but I don't know for certain.
Okay. There's a question about the minister's order that is to expire on May 9th. Will that be extended?
As I know, at this point, the ministry is doing a extensive reviewing of risk assessment, and they will decide somewhere between before the end of the week, and you will see that posted on the website. So we don't have a certain information that is going to be extended or not, but based on the number of the infected flocks that keep showing up, it is a possibility, but we don't have a straight answer for that.
Okay, thank you. So Brian again, has there been any positives found in sparrows or barn swallows? And maybe you can just kind of rhyme off that list of who has unfortunately been affected.
Yeah, so no sparrows or barn swallows yet. We have tested a few of those species at this point, but all of them have come back negative. And we're mostly seeing it in waterfowl. So that's ducks, geese, gulls. Also, all the raptor species are being affected by this. And as I mentioned, the corvids, the crows and ravens are the most recent ones that we're seeing this in.
Okay. So here's a question about larger birds. So someone who raises emus feels, or I guess the reality is keeping them locked up is detrimental to their leg health, and issues can develop. They can't really be fixed or turned around. So how can someone safely take care of emus and give them the exercise and outdoor time they need?
I think once again, it's going to be a function of risk. So right now it's a real high risk time period. We can take a look at, groups like African Lion Safari, Metro Toronto Zoo. They literally have locked everything up to keep their collection safe. So the question becomes, the balance. Is a potential leg issue worth just losing your flock at this point? So, is there a high risk now? Yes. Will there be a lower risk later on when migration is over? I think I can only tell Colin, I hope so at this point. Unfortunately, this is such a new disease, a novel disease to this continent and to our bird population. We don't know. So how do you exercise them? Can you hold them in a bit longer until we get some heat? I guess is the question, and we'll have to reevaluate that in a few weeks.
Right. So a similar question about some husbandry. So with parrots being safe indoors, what's the best way to get them some vitamin D?
I don't have a good answer for that. We can try and find out from someone like Dale Smith, or like Emily Martin's not on right now, but I can pass that by Dr. Dale Smith and see if she's got anything that we could post for next week on that. I know I've had some folks talk about keeping parrots, screened in. When I say screened in, like, the windows open, screens there, they can get sunlight. That's fine. It's just keeping the separation out. I'm like I said before, I'm more concerned about you walking outside and then having the bird, and then inadvertently stepping in some goose poop and bringing it in the house without knowing.
Right. Yeah, so it sounds like maybe a couple of these questions could be good follow-ups for the veterinarians that are in charge of these particular animals as well.
Oh, I just got a text. Let's see, full spectrum light will provide vitamin D. Look at that.
Okay.
Someone listening knows something more than I do. Thank you for that.
Someone always knows something.
Yep.
I'm not too sure what PR means, so if you know, that would be helpful. But when might closed PR areas reopen?
That one for Tori?
I'm also not quite sure what PR means currently.
Okay, we'll just have that person put the question in again and spell out what PR is. That's a new acronym for us here. So just a question about posting those Facebook links that you showed, and some concern around not even giving eggs to your family or friends. Is that accurate, or was it hatching eggs that was being referenced?
That was on the CFIA web or Facebook page. So you can go to the CFIA Facebook page and find that post. It does say, so what it says is, help prevent contact between your flock and wild birds, especially for the remainder of the spring migration until June. The next point is, don't share live birds, eggs, or other bird products, even with neighbors, friends, or family. So I would assume that would be either table eggs or fertile eggs.
Okay. So there's just a question about clarification around this minister's order that we've been referencing. Can someone just kind of give us a summary about what that's about?
So the minute, and I apologize, I just have to speak with the phone, and then it's a bad connection. So the ministry's order has been in place effectively April 9th, and that is related to Animal Health Act 2009, Section 24(6)D and 24(7). It is a restriction, movement to and participation of birds in events where they commingle, such as shows, sales, swaps, fairs, sports, and educational displays, is prohibited. And this is in addition to Canadian Food Inspection Agency requirements in primary control zones. This order is set up to expire on May the 9th, but it may be extended if required.
Okay, thank you. And I think Charlotte put the link to what the minister's order is all about in full detail as well in the chat here. So Danielle's just looking for where the positive cases have been. So there's a few maps, and so there's the wild bird populations as well as the small flock and commercial poultry. And so all of the maps, all of those sorts of links where active information is being updated, you can find on the Poultry Industry Council website, on the CFIA website, as well as on the OMAFRA website. How likely is it for AI to become an annual issue in Ontario during the waterfowl migration?
We are just new with this virus in Ontario and Canada, North America, but we can take an example from Europe. They are right now in a second wave. They started 2021 spring, and they haven't had a break in the summer, maybe just few cases, and it became endemic because it gets environmental exposure. So it is very possible that we can continue to see outbreaks in the summertime, and then we may have a second wave in fall. But that's just based on what other countries are experiencing or other continents.
So there's a question about if someone's en route somewhere, so folks are traveling from northwestern Ontario down, which is quite a long haul, and if a control zone is established while they're en route and they find they might have to go through it, is, you know, what's the process? What should they be doing, or what are they concerned about to make sure they make it to point B?
Yeah, I was just typing the answer there. So it's kind of tricky because if it's established while you're driving there, I mean, you will still definitely need a permit to be going through the area with birds. So the best option would be to contact our movement control group prior to you leaving to get all of the up-to-date information, and then maybe mention maybe the areas you are going through and see if they have any ideas on if you should have permits prior to leaving, or if you would have to call while you're en route. I haven't come across this yet, so I don't have a definite answer, but our movement control group should be able to help you.
I think with that one, it's only about a 10K zone. So if you can go drive around it, that's always a better option as opposed to trying to go through it.
Yeah, that's a good point. We had a poultry veterinarian reference on our prior call that he was taking extra time to drive all the way around the zones to make sure that he wasn't, you know, going through basically. So that's probably a good plan B as well. Is it okay, or would it be okay to participate in a wild birding festival such as the one near Port Elgin at the end of May, beginning of June?
If
Yeah.
the ministry's order is going to be extended and you'll fall between that period, it is not recommended. Probably that festival is not going to happen. If the order is not going to be in place at that time, I'll still recommend you just to pay attention and make sure if you have a flock at home, just to protect it. So change clothing, biosecurity measures, and then keep those birds safe.
Now, I guess to point out, the minister's order does not refer to wild birds. So if you're part of a birding group or participating in that, there's nothing that says you can't do that to go birding. But as Luci mentioned, if you have poultry at home, you want to make sure you do everything you can to make sure you don't bring the disease back into your back home to your flock. And the same goes for folks that are hunting turkeys right now or spending time out at a conservation area or whatever, right? That's going to be an issue. Like literally even golfing can be a risk to your flock because Canada geese love golf courses.
Right. So there's a question about, I guess the parameters that triggered the movement order or the commingling order. Can you just talk a little bit about how that's set? Because there's a question about how, what would it look like next year, that kind of thing.
Sure, it is hard to say, but I work close to the Chief Veterinarian of Ontario, and the Health Act that was issued in 2009, and then since then we've had no orders in place except this one. So you can imagine that was a very severe situation that the Chief Veterinarian of Ontario had to decide to put this in place. And it wasn't based on the number of flocks that been affected. It was mostly for, like, we did a full risk assessment of where those were located and how dense situation, how dense population flocks being outbreaks being identified and so on. So we've had a lot to discuss on our list to decide to go and approve this order. So it wasn't easy for us, believe us, and we'll keep watching that and then make sure that we keep all the flocks safe.
Still didn't get clarification from that individual who was asking around the closed PR areas, but maybe it got captured with another
Well, I guess the question becomes if it's in reference to the zones that we have, that's partially a function of how we get the zone released, which includes a proper cleaning and disinfection and involves being released by CFIA, correct? So it's more a function of, when do we get zone released? When it's deemed cleaned and disinfected by CFIA, at least on the commercial side.
Okay, so I don't see any other questions. Oh, Luci, do you mind just reiterating the lifespan of the virus on droppings?
Yes, I do see that question again. Research being done demonstrated that the resistance of virus in feces, it's depending on the temperature, the ambient temperature, and the UV light exposure. The colder it is and the more humid it is, the more virus is going to survive. On a dry environment, the surviving virus in feces will be 6 days and it's going to move up to 30 to 60 days in a wet environment.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so someone's just pointing out that there was a bit of an edit on that Facebook post that we shared from CFIA, and it was talking specifically about movement of poultry products for the primary control zones. So thank you for pointing that out. We will call it a day, and we look forward to joining you next Tuesday. Thanks very much for spending your evening with us.